Charles, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing real fine. How are you? Good
Oh man,
evening.
I'm
Good evening.
stoked, bro. I gotta tell you, man, I'm pretty daggone excited right now. Pretty
Well, that's
doggone excited right now.
like to say aloha to everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mel and Charlie, and thank you for having me on. Sorry, I got on a little bit late, but interesting. We just had a little interesting case and it involves again someone arriving not vaccinated, positive, starting up again.
Well, you know, the story never changes. It's the
Right.
same story every day, and that's why I'm so excited tonight. For two reasons. Number one, we have a congressman again, Congressman U.S. Rep. Kai Kahele is on. And, Charlie, you remember a while back, Dr. Larry Brilliant was on our news, was on the local news, and he was sharing. I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him share, but he was sharing some common sense
Mhm.
about what Hawaii should be doing.
Right.
And I remember Charlie. I remember saying, "We got to get this guy on a show. Got to get this guy on a show." And anyway, I kind of gave up because you get these big time dudes, man. These guys are well sought after by the world. Everybody wants to hear them. And would he come on the Mel and Charlie show? Yeah, right. But anyway, yesterday, it was yesterday or the day before. Kai called and says, "Hey Mel, you mind if we have Doctor Larry Brilliant on the show?" And I said, "Like the Larry Brilliant?" Yeah, the Larry Brilliant. Oh my gosh, absolutely. So, real quick adjustment. As you all know, uh, Congressman Kai Kahele submitted a plan. He was on our show a week ago or so,
Hmm.
and then last week he submitted his 10-point plan to the legislature, to all and to the governor, to his former colleagues, urging them, and he'll be on to talk about that. And it caused quite a little stir. In fact, I was just sharing with Dr. Brilliant about the governor's comments today. They specifically asked him, and we'll talk about that a little later.
Hmm.
But they're on tonight, and I expect a bunch of people jumping on because there's a lot of people that want to hear both Congressman Kahele and Dr. Brilliant. They came on early, Charlie. I had just turned my stuff on, and they both popped on. I was like, holy moly! So we had a little time to chat a little bit, and I think tonight's going to be a power night. So now would be the time, people. Hit the share button, make this go viral because tonight is going to be very unique. We've had a lot of people on our show, but tonight we got the one-two punch. Congressman Kahele, who's home, by the way, and of course Charlie with his Snicker bar, Mister Snicker, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to reserve my comments because I want Dr. Brilliant to speak on the new developments that happened today regarding the what I call the unsafe travel program. But I think tonight's going to be a special night. So now would be the time, people. Go ahead and hit the share button. I see some of you on YouTube. Unfortunately, you cannot see the comments, but feel free to post your comments or questions on any of the platforms. I see them all, and we'll definitely get them across to our guests tonight on the show. What do you think, Charlie? Yeah, I spoke to your wife today, Charlie. I spoke to your wife today. I scolded her. She's not supposed to be working. She's supposed to be resting.
Yep.
But that
Yep.
woman is like superwoman, man. Please give her a hug from Patsy and I tonight.
Will do. Will do. Yep.
All right. Well, let's go. Let's get this show started. Let's get Congressman Kahele and Dr. Brilliant, who I think there he is. Hang on,
Go.
we're just gonna move you guys around a little bit. I found out that I can. There we go. Whoo! What's up, guys?
Aloha, Mel and Charlie. Great to see you, and thanks so much for having me. And I'm about as thrilled as you guys are to be able to share this next hour with one of the nation's top, doctors and someone who led the eradication of smallpox at the World Health Organization in the late 1970s. And he is just an incredible wealth of knowledge. And I'm looking forward to learning so much from him tonight. And I'm looking forward to him sharing his expertise to not just Hawaii, but the nation on what we need to be doing right now with COVID. And so it's great to be here. And it's awesome to be here with
Hey,
Dr.
Kai, you might have to come closer to your mic because it was breaking up. Try now. Try to do a real quick test.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. How's it
Boom,
going?
bingo. That was
Okay.
it. That was it.
Oh,
All right,
wow.
Dr. Brilliant. I went to LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Wikipedia. I'm just going to read this. It's very short introduction because I'm like starstruck right now. Larry Brilliant, American epidemiologist, technologist, philanthropist, and author who worked with the World Health Organization from 1973 to 76, helping to successfully eradicate smallpox. He received his undergraduate training as well as his master's in public health from the University of Michigan, where he worked on the staff of the Gargoyle Humor magazine, whatever that is, and his MD from Wayne State University School of and his MD from Wayne State University of Medicine. He moved to California for his internship at the California Pacific Medical Center. Dr. Brilliant is board certified in preventive medicine and public health. There's a whole lot more that I'm not going to read because I want to spend time talking to you, Doc. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks, Mel. And Mel, you know, if you don't have a sense of humor, it's just not funny anymore.
Well, you know, that was part of it. I was thinking, is this guy serious? I saw him on the news. He's a pretty serious guy. Charlie and I, you know, Charlie's like, I'm the subdued guy. Charlie's the kind of, he goes off a little bit, but yeah, this show is uncensored, unedited, unscripted, unnothing. Everything goes. So I really don't know where to start. I'm going to start with you, Kai, because you.
I got to show my, one of my favorite sponsors, Snickers. Okay, there we go.
Now my wife is going to be running in with another orange. My wife makes me eat oranges while Charlie gets to eat Snickers. Kai, opening day of the legislature, you drop a communication, you do a press conference, you do a press release to the governor, to your former colleagues at the legislature. We had spoken about this a week before on this show, and you had shared with us your concern. You had shared with us that you were going to look into a bunch of things. And lo and behold, shortly after that, you dropped this press conference, this press release, explaining your frustration, but more importantly, not just your frustration, but your recommendations or suggestions of how we can do better. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. And to be honest with you, Kai, I think a lot of people had given up hope on our government leaders, from the president, Congress, to everybody, because no one has been saying anything, especially here in Hawaii. And then you come out with this, and I will tell you, I had private messages from our viewers in the village telling me that you finally brought some hope. So I want you to open up, Kai. What triggered that? What responses have you had? And we'll start there, my friend.
Well, thanks, Mel, for the question. You know, a lot of it has been building up for quite some time. You know, as I've traveled around the state and I've had the opportunity to talk to people and hear from them, you know, they're frustrated and they're afraid, and they are looking for a government that can provide hope for them, that can provide answers, that can provide a unified strategy to deal with now what is beginning our third year with a deadly health pandemic. And that has put an enormous strain on our workforce, on our communities, on our educational system. And I just felt it was time. You know, I was having a real difficult time. You know, we've all had a tough time over the last 2 months. You know, I got COVID. My family got COVID. So many of my friends got COVID. With the shutdown of several of our schools throughout the state, including one that my daughters go to, and just hearing the frustrations from the family on that day when the school notice went out, hundreds of families scrambling for childcare and what they were going to do tomorrow. Can't even get through tomorrow with figuring out what to do with their children. And then children stressed and crying again because they're back on Zoom and doing distance learning. You know, I just knew that I had to do something. And I was very frustrated that over the last 2 months, we basically heard nothing from our senior administration and our senior leadership. And that goes for everybody there on the 5th floor. We heard nothing, Charlie. and Mel, and that deeply concerned me. And I decided to talk to a few people. Dr. Brilliant was someone who gave me some time, and I had a chance to ask some questions of him. And I put my thoughts down on a paper, and I wanted to, if I was in that position, what would I say to the state, and how would we put together a unified strategic plan for Hawaii, and clearly and succinctly outline 10 really important steps that, Mel, probably should have been done a year and a half ago. Some would argue that it's a little too late to implement some of these things. I don't think so, because I'm a plan for the worst, and hope for the best. And I don't want to run the risk that another mutation of this virus or another deadly pandemic, wreaks havoc across the state. That's what I did. I looked at my colleagues, my former colleagues in the legislature, and there's 76 of them that were all coming back to start the next session. Having been there, I know how critical that first week is, because that's when legislators introduce bills. That deadline is tomorrow, Mel. And tomorrow is the last day for legislators to introduce bills at the legislature. With the recent Supreme Court ruling about gut and replace, it's going to be heavily scrutinized this legislative session, and it will probably be very, very difficult to introduce or gut and replace a bill, regardless of the situation. So I wanted to implore my colleagues, give them some opportunities, whether you like one of them, 10 of them, none of them, all of them, some of them. At least they had something to chew on. And I hope that they took it to heart, and that as part of a larger COVID package for this legislative session, that they would introduce that and look at implementing some of these things that I think are really, really important. And when I looked at what branch of government could take action, should take action, it is the state legislature. And that's what we did. And I think it caught a lot of people off guard. And I hope it allowed people to see where I stand, what was in my na'au and my heart, and what I really felt. We were not meeting the moment as a state. And that, just like you said, Mel, we needed to provide people some type of hope that somebody had a plan, and that somebody was willing to take a stand and put that out there. So that's what we did. And it's gotten a lot of positive feedback over the last few days. And I've had a chance to talk to a lot of local health experts and national health experts. People have wrote into the Star Advertiser and commented on how they felt the plan was spot on and met the moment. And I hope that resonates with the legislature.
I sure hope so, Congressman. I still haven't heard anything from our legislature at all. I did hear that they're thinking about introducing a bill to take away the authority from the athletic director of the University of Hawaii from hiring the football coach, and that should go with the regents. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that kind of stuff being discussed, but no one has stepped up. Even after your wonderful, reasonable, practical suggestions, no one has stepped up. And I'm hoping they all watch this, Dr. Brilliant. They may not be on live. You watch the numbers of viewers tomorrow, because they all watch after the fact, because they don't want their names popping up on the screen, because then we'll ask them a question. But so they will hear this tonight. I can promise you, from the governor on down, they will hear this. So, Dr. Brilliant, you were on the news several months ago, probably closer to a year ago. I've lost all track of time. You had voiced your insights on Hawaii and how unique Hawaii was, and actually gave us some suggestions. What are your thoughts as it relates to COVID and Hawaii and Kai's 10-step plan?
Well, Mel and Charlie, thank you for inviting me. It's really, really very nice to be with you. I'm here because a couple of months ago, I got this phone call from the 808 area code, and I have so many friends in Hawaii, but I didn't recognize the number. And I picked it up, and it was this congressman. And we began a conversation. And, I feel like I've been coming to Hawaii for almost 50 years. I lived in India for 10 of those years working for WHO. And then even after that, I would go back to Asia so many times. And I'd be coming from Ann Arbor, where I was a professor, and the shorter way to go is to go through Europe, but the better way to go is to go through Hawaii. So I would stop halfway every time. And I have so many friends in Hawaii, and I love it, the state, the people so much. And the simple thing for me is I think there are 49 states that are so envious that Hawaii has the possibility of excluding the virus from coming onto the state. And I feel like somehow, and I don't understand this, and I don't mean this as a criticism because I don't understand the reasons behind it, but it seems like Hawaii has squandered that amazing opportunity that it uniquely has. Can you imagine California? Can you imagine Governor Newsom in California saying that when people fly into California from Texas, they have to be tested and kept out if they have, he'd love to do that, of course, but we can't do that to Texas. Can you imagine New York saying, if you're coming from Florida, you have to be tested? You can't do that. There is no other state. Puerto Rico can, but no other state can do what Hawaii can do, which is the simple thing that Hawaii was doing on the Big Island, being able to test people before they got on an airplane. And the airlines were very happy with that. It kept the airplane space, people being on the airplane safe, and then being tested again when they arrived on the Big Island. And being able to find somebody who was positive and to put them into isolation and to allow them to come out of isolation when they tested out of isolation. That simple matter would reduce the number of cases that keep coming in. Now, Omicron is one of the most infectious of all diseases that we've ever had in our lifetimes, and perhaps in all time. Certainly the most infectious variant until 2 weeks ago of all of the COVID variants. And now, of course, there's yet one more variant, which is called BA2, which is a variant of the Omicron virus. It's called the stealth Omicron variant because it eludes the ability of PCR tests to distinguish it from other COVID tests, other COVID viruses. And BA2 is even more infectious, if you can believe it. And I'm having trouble believing it. It's even more infectious than Omicron. And so in places like Denmark and Northern Europe, it's now replacing Omicron. And as we continue to let the virus roam, we'll be having more and more variants. And as those variants occur, the variants are just like every other person in America. The variant also wants to come to Hawaii and to vacation. So you're going to be bringing in people from all parts of the world, and they will be bringing with them the risk that they have at home. And by simply testing them at the airport and only asking people who test positive, which means they're infectious, to do the most common, simple, ethical thing, which is to isolate themselves, that would reduce the number of new cases coming in to the islands and new outbreaks. And you've got some amazing people. The public health people are wonderful. The mayors are wonderful. You've got so many good people. I've never understood what the reluctance was for reinstating that system, which worked so well earlier in the pandemic. And I'll just say one more thing. I was told by some of the managers, the elected officials, that the reason that they didn't want to have testing on arrival is that the hotel chains were against it. So I went and I talked to the hoteliers, and the hoteliers are not against it. I was told that the hoteliers would think it would stop tourism from coming. But they said, no, we don't want our staff to get sick. We don't want them to be out because they've been infected. And tourists, when they come, they want to know they're coming to a safe place. As tourists watch the COVID case counts go up, tourism comes down. And I thought, well, you could have such a wonderful sales campaign for tourism to the safest islands in the world. And so I just don't understand it. And I don't say these things in anger or judgment. I say them because I'm perplexed. I can't understand the reasoning. So I'm here to support Kai, Representative Kahele. I'm here to support his 10-point plan. I wish that more people in Congress and in my own state, I wish that more senators and more congressmen and women would take an active interest in the global health components of this pandemic. This is the worst pandemic we've had in our lifetimes. None of us have been through 2 years such as we've been through, and there'll be more years like this to come. And I just want to say something about my friends who say that this is the end of the pandemic. Omicron is like Neo in The Matrix, and Omicron is going to lead us to Zion, and that'll be the end of the pandemic. I wish it were true. I will pray that that is true, but it isn't going to be true. It can't be true because we still have 3 billion people in the world who have not had dose 1 of a vaccine. We have so many billions of people who will, before this is all over, they will contract the disease. And when they have the disease, Charlie, when they have the disease, they'll have billions, tens of billions of viruses in their body. And all of those viruses are going to be replicating. And they've only got one prime directive: replicate, replicate, replicate. And as they replicate, about 3% of those will become mutations. And from those mutations will come some variants. And so you just imagine the staggering amount of viral load in the world of 7 billion people being infected with Omicron, each with billions of viruses, and all of them replicating. And what might happen, and I say that because this is the biggest science experiment that ever happened in the world. We've never had 7 billion people all infected with the same disease within the same short period of time. If for no other reason, we've never had 7 billion people in the world. And out of it, I can't say, none of us can say. We can certainly hope that Omicron is the last variant, although it is no longer the last variant. It's the last but one variant now. But that's not a bet I think we should be making. That's not a bet I think we should be making. Our own health and our immunocompromised parents and grandparents. It's not a bet we should be making for the economy. That's not a bet we should be making for the strength of our country. And so I think Hawaii's got a chance to lead the way. It's not too late. And there's, I'm just going to be in the Big Island in a couple of months. The team in the Big Island is sensational. I've worked with them very closely. They're phenomenal. Let's give them the tools that they need to make that island safe and all the other islands safe.
Thank you, Doc. Where are you? In Michigan right now?
No, I'm in California.
Oh, okay. So not so bad. 2 hours ahead.
I live in a town called Mill Valley, just outside of San Francisco. Come visit. It's cold.
I would love to. Yeah. Well, a big part of I think one of the parts of Kai's plan is about the testing, and you mentioned it. And we have been pushing. Our village has been pushing the state to try get pre and post arrival testing. And the state is not going to do it today. The governor on TV said that they're going to fix or change the safe. I call the unsafe travel program, but they're going to change. They're going to add the booster into the vaccinated status. So if you have a booster, then you can come in without a test. If you don't have a booster, then you got to test 72 hours, Doc. 72 hours before you depart. What are your thoughts on that? And I know we've had enough experts on here to tell us about the shortcomings of a 72-hour pre-departure test. What are your thoughts?
Well, the boosters are wonderful. Just technically speaking, 2 doses of mRNA vaccine are not enough to protect you from either getting infected or protect you from getting sick. If you think from the perspective of the virus, Omicron looks at people that have had 2 doses of mRNA vaccines and doesn't even see that as a speed bump. But if you've had the 3rd dose, the booster, if you've had that 3rd dose, then you go back up to 90% successful in being able to avoid hospitalization, being able to avoid going in the ICU, being able to avoid being very sick. But it doesn't stop you very much from getting infected. So those people who get on the airplane that have been boosted, they can very well be bringing active virus and be infectious when they land. And 72 hours just doesn't work anymore. The incubation period of Omicron is about half of what the incubation period was of Delta, which was shorter than the incubation period of Alpha and Beta and Gamma. And it's down to about 2 days. So if the incubation period is 2 days, certainly taking a test 72 hours earlier is not going to be very valuable. It's the test on arrival that is the most important. And it's good to do the pre-departure test as well, but it's the test on arrival that will protect the islands.
Hey, Mel, can I chime in?
Absolutely.
Because that's one of the things in the 10-point plan, and I think it was number 2 after changing the definition of fully vaccinated to include boosters, which, I might say I strongly support Mayor Victorino's decision to do that throughout the county of Maui, and BYU Hawaii in Laie, who has implemented it on its own, effective 1 February, and the University of Hawaii, who seems to be strongly considering implementing that. So I think that's headed in that direction. But what I have heard in terms of the testing, you heard it today with Governor Ige, is that very, very difficult to implement. We don't have enough tests. It's a logistical nightmare. We don't know how we would do it. What type of test would you give on the departure location, whether it's a PCR or an antigen? What type of test would you do on the arrival? I look at virtually every Pacific Island nation that has similar situations to us in terms of controlling its borders is doing exactly what we suggested. Australia, French Polynesia, Tahiti, Japan, Singapore, New Zealand, Fiji. You have to test before you come in. You have to test when you land. And so I'd like to ask, Dr. Brilliant, what type of, if we were to implement this, what type of tests would we do, and how would we accomplish the logistical piece of it? Because that's what people are saying is impossible to do. Like, and I said earlier, we should have been doing this a year and a half ago, but we didn't, right? And we didn't buy the technology that we could do to, within 30, 45 minutes, have that result and be able to know quickly while the passenger is at the airport or getting their bags or whatever, that they were negative. And I've said before, right? We sent about $3 billion to the state to use and have the latitude to buy what they needed to buy to implement things like this. But wondering what Dr. Brilliant's thoughts are on how we would address the testing piece and the assertion that it's impossible to do at this point, so we shouldn't even consider it.
Well, I think we did have it a year and a half ago, and it worked really well on the Big Island. I'll speak to the Big Island, and it just requires the commitment to do it, and to plan for it, and to choose amongst the options that you have. And today we have a lot more tools in our toolbox, just as you said. I think the proper cadence, the proper dosing for mRNA vaccines, it's just a 3-dose regime. It should have been from the beginning. It's not really a booster, the 3rd dose. It's just a 3rd dose. Many other vaccines are given in 3 doses. The mRNA vaccines should be given along with the MMR vaccines that kids get in 3 doses. So I don't think that's anything novel. I think it's really important to not call somebody fully vaccinated unless they've had those 3 doses. So I support your first point on your plan. But now we've got soon to come, please God, we're having these antivirals that are being produced, especially by Pfizer. This is a remarkable tool. If it's given early enough, you'll be able to protect yourself against getting sick and getting into a hospital perhaps 95% of the time. We'll be able to change what COVID is for those who are lucky enough to get that antiviral and who are not, don't have a contraindication because they're taking a lipid, for example, which may be a contraindication, or other pills. And the key to making that work is going to be you have to find that you have that sooner than we've ever, even before you have symptoms, but just as you're getting symptoms. So we need to figure out the way to implement that. But that's another tool in our toolbox. Likewise, we have a whole new battery, a whole new type of tests that we never had when we did this before. You could certainly do a PCR test on arrival. There's a group on the Big Island that have these Cepheid rapid PCR systems. They're terrific. They will give you a result as good as a PCR will give you, and they'll do it within 54 minutes. That's a terrific option. But there's yet another option, which is there's something that looks like an at-home test. It looks like an antigen test, but it's actually a molecular test. And there's 3 kinds of these that have had emergency use authorization from the FDA within the last 3 or 4 or 5 months. One of them is Lucira, the other is Q, and the third is called direct test or detect test. These are almost 97, 98% as good as a PCR, and they get the disease really early before there are any symptoms, like a PCR does. And they're about 1/5 the price of a regular PCR test. So if Hawaii made the decision that we were going to put together all of these tools that we have in the toolbox, and one component of that would be an on-arrival test, I'm sure we can put together, and the people who are doing this can put together a testing regimen on arrival that will be much less expensive than it was the last time we did it. And it worked really well the last time as well. And now you've got all this recovery money and that I understand is sitting there only for tests. So I'm sure you could figure out a way to use that money very effectively on the islands.
Hey, Doc, Dr. Scott Miskovich, Dr. Kauhi Manu Akiona from Premier Medical, they did the testing on the Big Island. It was done really well. They had the support DOH at the time. Dr. Scott Miskovich, they are the leaders in testing in the state from day one, and he has made it very clear that the tests are available. The tests are available, and in fact, the prices, like you just mentioned, have come down quite a bit since this all started 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is that tests are available. It's like you said, once they make the decision to do it, it can be done.
No, I listened to your interview with Scott. I thought he made some excellent points, and I think that he's one of the testing companies that has done a terrific job on the island. And once again, I'm perplexed that the program was halted because, and even now, because it would cost a fraction of what it costed then to do it. And besides that, that is a cost that should be borne by a tourist coming to the island. Now, it's different for when there's a Hawaiian from the state of Hawaii who is going away and coming back and traveling between the islands. They also should be tested, but that's another category. It's the people who are coming from all over the world and bringing and importing the risks that they have that are the greatest problem that we have. And they should pay for that. If I'm coming to Hawaii and you tell me it's going to cost me another $85 to be tested on arrival, and I'm going to get a PCR quality test, I'm going to be very happy. I'm going to want to know that. I'm not going to want to infect people. And, where else would I like to be if I have COVID than in a fine, hotel in Maui or on the Big Island or Kauai or Honolulu? I don't want to leave any of them out. Lanai.
You don't want to get it on Kauai because we have 9 ICU beds here.
Yep.
You don't want to get it here on Kauai, that's for sure.
You don't want to get it at all. But if you're going to have it, I'd like to be by an ocean and be in Hawaii.
Couple questions from our viewers, Doc. Monoclonal antibodies. You were talking about the antivirals. The feds apparently have stopped the the movement of the monoclonal antibody treatments.
All but one. That's right. They stopped
Yeah.
Lilly and Regeneron. Um, and this is because the Omicron virus is a shapeshifter, and it has the ability to elude immunity, elude the it has been able to elude the immunity that you get from either certain vaccines, prior infections, and also from monoclonals, with one exception. Um, but the antivirals that Pfizer is working on, and Merck as well, but Merck one, unfortunately, it doesn't have quite as good a record in terms of the early results. We'll see how they both perform in the field. But yeah, we've lost the ability to use monoclonals against Omicron, and fortunately, we have another tool coming into our toolkit as we lose those.
So you're in agreement with that? That I would guess. I mean, you're again. This is the guy that was worked on the team that eradicated smallpox. For those of you that don't know, this is Dr. Larry Brilliant. I know some of you joined us late. Um, so that makes sense. That because I mean I'm so skeptical about CDC and FDA, and many times they're even as it relates to the reduction of the quarantine time from 10 days to 5 days, the exposure time now it's back up to 6 feet, 15 minutes. I mean we're confused, and that's why I think there's a lot of skepticism. But so you're pretty confident that in fact the monoclonal antibodies they don't perform well with Omicron.
They don't. The two that I mentioned, Lilly and Regeneron, don't work well with Omicron. Maybe this is a moment when I ask an appeal for compassion, a very great Hawaiian quality. In this case, I ask for compassion for the scientists. We didn't have BA.2, this new variant, 15 days ago. We didn't have Omicron 2.5 months ago. Things are moving really quickly. Everything that we knew about infectious disease changed when we had the first SARS-CoV-2 virus. And then it changed again with the alpha variant, and again with the beta, and again with, we're going to go through the Greek alphabet. And every time we're going to learn something new that a virus does that we didn't think it could do. Who on God's green earth would have imagined that a variant of a coronavirus would emerge on day one with 50 or 60 new mutations? Who would have ever imagined that right after that, 2 months later, a sister, daughter, cousin, new variant would emerge with 80 variants, which is BA.2? We wouldn't have expected that. So my plea is for compassion for the scientists, and for the scientists, my plea is clearer communications, and especially about what they don't know, and don't make it up if you don't know.
Yeah, I asked that question because there's a few of us, and I think one of our viewers especially keeps asking about that. And I've seen the monoclonals. They early on Kauai anyway. As soon as you tested positive, boom, you were in getting the infusion, and that is very difficult to get now. In fact, it's probably not going to be possible.
Well, could I could amend what I said, which is there are still some cases of Delta.
That's my concern.
The monoclonals will work fine for Delta, and so we're very fortunate that for Omicron, a PCR test will be able to not only tell you that you've got COVID, but it'll tell you if you have Omicron or not. And I don't want to get too wonky, but it has something called the SGTF, the spike gene test failure, because Omicron knocks out one of the 3 targets on the PCR machine. So we can tell if it's Omicron. So if any of the friends that you have get sick with COVID and they want to get one of the 2 monoclonals that the FDA has said don't use for Omicron, they should, push their doctor and the public health people to tell them what variant they have. And if it's Delta, those treatments will still work.
Got it. Makes sense. I think for us, I'm not sure what's going on, but I don't know. So again, the quarantine time from 10 days to 5 days. You get any insights on that? Is that again? We still have Delta,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I would say first of all, I can't recall worse communications than than the way that was announced. 10 days, 10 days, oh, 5 days. What they should have said was that, let's be honest, folks, we don't have enough doctors and nurses to take care of you if you have a heart attack or you're on chemotherapy or you're having a difficult birth, and all the hospital beds are being taken up. And it's really important that we get doctors and nurses back in to work. And if we isolate them for 10 days and they're not really infectious, then we're not going to be able to take care of you. They should have said that. And they should have said, for only the medical field, only for the doctors and nurses, we're going to ask them that after 5 days of isolation, they should start testing themselves. And when they have a test or two that's negative, then they should be allowed to leave isolation and come back to work. We didn't do that. Instead, that, very quickly, CDC was asked, well, okay, what about people who are not in the hospital and who are in an MRI machine center that's 50 yards away from the hospital? Or what if they're in a lab? And CDC said, oh, we'll include them too. And then they included more people. And then they said, it's too late. Let's include everybody. I think that was a mistake. I think CDC recognizes that was a mistake. Then they should have said that was a mistake, but it's because the virus is changing so rapidly, and what was true yesterday is just not true today. And we're going to have a lot more todays tomorrow. We're going to have a lot more days when there's something new coming down. You didn't know about BA2, did you? I mean,
yeah.
I think we've got it in 40 countries now. So the world of virology is being turned on its head by what Omicron is doing, and before that, what SARS-CoV-2 was doing, and there's a lot of other things to think about. There's an excellent article in the New York Times on Sunday, frightening, I would say, about the 12 animal species that are infected with SARS-CoV-2, with COVID. And we're worried now about not only spillover, but spill back, that animals can spill over their viruses to humans, and humans can give it back to the animals, and they can give it back changed in a new variant to humans. That happened in Denmark with mink. 200 Danish mink farmers were infected from a variant that came back from minks who were infected by other humans. So we're worrying about some of these things as well in the future. We don't really have any real reservoir of animals that we're worried about, but it's just the theoretical possibility that keeps us on our toes. And so be compassionate to your friendly neighborhood scientist, because they're going through quite a bit, just as all of us are.
Hey, Mel, can I ask a question of Dr. Brilliant?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mel, can I ask the question of Dr. Brilliant?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
Go ahead.
I guess this touches on that testing piece if you are in isolation. So we know what the current CDC policy is, which is now 5 days, and there's some confusion about that. I talked about other Pacific Island nations as an example. Australia, it's still 14 days. But part of the plan that I had suggested, and this was after consulting with Dr. Brilliant, was to come out of isolation, to know that you don't have a high viral load and you are not infectious. If you would take a rapid test on the 5th day, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can still be testing positive on the 5th day, and it would be better if it was the 7th or the 8th day. But married up with the CDC, you would do a rapid antigen on the 5th day, negative test, wait 2 days, rapid antigen again on the 7th day, negative test, and then you're good to go. Any for the people that are watching this show, Dr. Brilliant, some of them are basically self-regulating when they return to normal life from isolation. What would you recommend people do?
I would recommend, Kai, that you call me Larry.
Okay, Larry.
Then
We start there.
Just the Dr. Brilliant thing gets old after a while.
Okay.
Living up to it. So let's say that the clock begins when you're no longer symptomatic. So you're in isolation, you've tested positive, you either have had symptoms and you were tested for that reason, or you were a contact and you were tested and tested positive, or you just randomly tested for employment or for coming to Hawaii and you tested positive. You don't think you're. So either the date that you were tested positive or your last symptom, that's when the clock begins. If you go 5 days after that, and then you do as you said, I like that idea, is you test negative once with an antigen test, and then 2 days later, again negative with an antigen test. You really have accumulated almost 9 or 10 days since you were first infected. And I think that's the general way in which you can get out. Now, that'll confuse things even more because we want black and white simplicity. Just tell me how many days. We don't want the nuance. But the nuance will get us out of this, I think. 5 days is wrong. The 5 days for Omicron, especially because Omicron seems to get much of its increase in because on the back end, it continues to be infectious. So whether it's 5 days or 8 days or 7 days, some people will continue being infectious for 10 days or 11 days. It'll only be a few people, but those are the people who will then spread it the most. So I really like the idea of test to get out of jail, test to get out of isolation. And in that way, that's the only time I think you should use antigen tests. Don't use them at the front end, but use them at the back end for that purpose. I think that's a really good idea. And I think that's something that people can do. You can live with that. You can go down to the Walgreens on the corner and you can get 2 antigen tests for $19. And then you know that when you get out, you're not going to infect your grandmother who's immunocompromised or your kids.
Mahalo for that.
Kai, I'm going to jump to you real quick because the governor mentioned today when he was asked about your 10-step program or your 10-step plan, and he said, well, if the congressman wants to send over us some tests or masks, we would accept it. Have you had an opportunity to, and we'll get back to more doctor questions, but this is burning in my head right now. Have you sat down with the governor or had any discussion with any of your colleagues? Any hope that something will change or you have not heard?
I have not directly spoken to Governor Ige, Mel. I have had communications with legislators and conveying how I think it's so important that the legislature take a proactive role in this, and that there's a short window of opportunity to do that really closes tomorrow. In terms of the governor's comments, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. A matter of fact, I'd like all the rapid tests to be made and purchased right here in Hawaii from a local vendor. The first one I can think of is Ocean. And Dr. Patrick Sullivan and his team, who have created a rapid antigen test that was at least about 2 weeks ago pending FDA emergency use approval. And as soon as that gets to EUA, I think we should buy as much of them as we can. When you're talking about masks, there was about a year and a half ago a vendor in Kona that was making masks and N95s or KN95s or 94s. We should be buying them as much as we can from them. Let's support local businesses, Mel. We have the ingenuity. We have the talent here in Hawaii that can be doing that. And we sent the federal government and your congressional delegation worked really hard through CARES 1, CARES 2, and then I had a role in the American Rescue Plan that sent billions of dollars to the state. So we should be able to procure these. We have the resources to do them. We need them right now. And we also need to have a strategic stockpile of tests uh, uh, here in Hawaii, so that we're not waiting, we're not being reactive. Now we need to be proactive, and so that's something that I would, I would hope the governor would and his team would look at exploring, because I have seen the Oceanit rapid test. I have tried it. It works. It's solid. And it looked like just any other rapid test that you would buy at CVS or Long's, made right here in Hawaii, by our people in Hawaii, and we can do that right here.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. The other topic that is a burning topic with our villagers here in our village, our viewers, is schools. The schools. I mean, it's pretty much. We had the union president on our show last night, and he shared with us the sheer numbers of positives that are happening, and the 40% or whatever the teachers are out, and they're gathering kids and moving them in one classroom or in the gym, and they're having substitutes watch them, and the Department of Education and the Department of Health and our governor continues to say that the transmission is not occurring in schools. They're bringing into the schools. What are your thoughts on that? It's the numbers are growing, and the other part of this question is, our lieutenant governor keeps talking about us being endemic and that we're on the tail end, and yet I have not seen any expert heard any expert mention that word endemic as it relates to this Omicron. What are you seeing across the country?
Well, let me take endemic and let Kai take schools. How's that? I think schools is the hardest question. Endemic is not a word which means paradise. When you say that the virus has gone endemic, it doesn't mean they've gone on vacation, whether to Hawaii or any other place. It's not success, it's failure. And when I was working to eradicate smallpox killed almost 500 million people while it was endemic in the 20th century. Being endemic is not something to say, okay, well, we're done with that, it's become endemic. And that's the way it's being used, and that's incorrect. Endemic means a disease which is occurring in a place you're expecting it to occur in quantities you expect it to occur. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that it's not virulent and that it's not killing people. So it's a poor choice of words, just technically. But it's not just the lieutenant governor who makes that conflation. I think this is just widespread. Endemic is maybe taking on a different meaning because we're so desperately want to get out of pandemics. And I understand that. It is possible that Omicron becomes the last pandemic, or Omicron plus stealth Omicron, the BA2, that they become the last viruses in a chain of transmission. And there's some reason for thinking that's a plausible hypothesis, because we've had 4 previous coronaviruses that probably in pre-recorded history did the same thing that COVID has done. Perhaps it was a pandemic, and perhaps some of the pandemics that were actually written about in history were mischaracterized and were actually another kind of COVID or another kind of coronavirus. And we have 4 of those that seem to have gone and affected a large number of people all over the world. And the population then was hundreds of millions or single digit billions. It wasn't 7 billion. And then those coronaviruses retired into the retirement home for coronaviruses, which is called, they became colds. You may not know this, that every year when you get a cold, there are about 8 or 10 different viruses, different ones that cause different diseases, all of which together are called colds. 4 of those are coronaviruses. So it's not silly or out of realm of possibility that this coronavirus will also one day become a cold. The question is when. And where I disagree is with people who think it's now. It's not now when 3 billion people have not yet gotten Omicron, and they're going to get it because they haven't been vaccinated. So I worry that we are declaring victory too soon, and that it's giving people the license to think that they can go out, take their mask off, and go to a bar and get a couple of drinks and not know who's next to them and what their immune status is. So I try to make it as lighthearted as I can, but it's very serious because for some people, Omicron is a mild disease. And I want to even kind of recharacterize that word. Mild is a clinical word. It means that for you getting COVID, it's milder if you get Omicron than if you had Delta. So you can say it's milder than Delta. But look at what's happening to society. We're talking about 30-40% of teachers being out of school. You can't have schools. 30-40% of policemen not being able to go to work. 30-40% of firemen not being able to go to work. Nobody able to pick up the trash. You can't run your small business because you've had so much absenteeism. The hotels are losing staff. It is not mild in a societal way. It's deadly serious. So it's not endemic and it's not mild, but I understand how those words are being used. And it's not ridiculous to think that one day, and we should all pray for that. We should pray that the people who say that Omicron and coronavirus are going to retire and become colds. And I hope that happens sooner. But the evidence, I'm afraid, it's very risky to bet on that, I think.
And the other part of this that a lot of our leaders do not talk about is the long haul, the long term impacts of COVID, of Delta, of Omicron. I know a lot of people. Even I saw a viewer in here post earlier tonight. This thing has a 99.8% survival rate. That's not accurate. I mean, surviving, but it's not recovery. It's not a recovery rate because we're hearing the stories now. In fact, Dr. Miskovich in an earlier Clubhouse discussion this afternoon was talking about the issues with kidneys and hearts from youngsters that have had COVID, even vaccinated ones. But the long haulers, the long-term impacts are still, like you said, science is changing. We're still learning. And what are your thoughts on that as far as the long-term impacts? And
I think for the reader who wrote in and saying that 98.9 or 99% of people don't die from COVID, I think that's right. But if 1% do die, that would be 3 million Americans. That's, can you imagine? I mean, we also have to face the fact that by March or April, we will pass 1 million Americans. You know, the total number who died in 1918 was 620,000. We will double that easily. We may triple it. It's not a mild disease, and it's going to cut us into more little pieces as a society. It's going to increase the schism between left and right, Republicans and Democrats, because and now it's going to cut us by age, because the 90% of people who have been dying in the United States are over 60, and does that mean that we're willing to go on with our life only at the small cost of killing off our grandparents? I hope that's not what it means. I hope that person doesn't mean that. It's a dangerous disease for those who are immunocompromised. 7% of Americans have general immunocompromised disease. Another percent are getting chemotherapy. Some are in a dangerous moment in pregnancy when they shouldn't get COVID. They should get the vaccine, but not COVID, because it's so dangerous. And if people are immunocompromised, the death rate gets very, very high. And if they're older and immunocompromised, and they have any risk factors. So what are we going to say? Are we going to say that this wonderful country of ours is now going to be divided into those who deserve to live and those who don't, based only on their age or on having had cancer that wasn't their fault? I don't think we want that. So I think the caller or the writer who wrote that, I would ask them to re-examine their thinking and to go back to first principles. What do we know about what we value in America? We value our families, we value our elders, we value each other. I don't think they meant that in the way that it sounded.
I think it's one of those things that go viral on the web because it sounds it's just something that's very easy to pass on. But when you just broke it down in a way that I never did, and wow, that's quite impacting. So,
Now,
Congressman,
you want to touch on the school piece?
yeah, I was just going to say, Congressman, where do we go from here as far as schools? I think, like I said last night, also Tui brought up some major concerns about how we're going, and what are your thoughts?
Well, let me answer first, and then I'd love to hear what Larry has to say in terms of vaccinations in children, and especially those that are in our K through 12 school system. Because if we thought our booster count statewide was low, and it is low, I think it's still below 30%. The rest of the state has at least 2 shots at about 74%. I would imagine that the vaccination rate for children ages 5 to 18 are even much lower. And I just want to make sure everyone and I say this, my wife and I both decided to vaccinate both of our daughters. They're 5 and 7. They got their first shot as soon as the first shot was available in the first week. And we did that because we wanted them to have the second shot in early December, because we wanted them to be fully vaccinated before the travel season. And it's a good thing we did, Mel, because Omicron came, right? Nobody was talking about Omicron back in early November. And so we're so glad we got that. They had no reactions, no post-shot symptoms, and they were perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine today. So that's my personal story. And I would encourage all parents to consider getting their child vaccinated if they're eligible. As far as schools, the virus doesn't care about your politics, your socioeconomic status, your race, your gender, your orientation. It has one mission, and that is to infect whoever it is and as many people as it can. And the fact of the matter is, it is in our schools, with our students, with our faculty, with people that work there. And so what I think we need to do is a couple of things outlined. And I guess the second question, Larry, would be, how would we implement testing in schools? Because I think that is something that is not being done now, that needs to be done. But I think we also need to look at a layered response, which includes the resources, it includes proper communication, establishing trust and leadership, and working together with not just the administration and the DOE and the Board of Education, but the Charter School Commission and the Hawaii State Teachers Association and the other unions that work and represent people that work in our schools. Clearly, getting vaccinated is something that I would encourage everyone to do. So that's the first thing. Implementing some type of testing protocol or regimen, I think, is also important. Wearing the proper type of masks, especially for our children, N95s, N94s, ones that are fit for kids. Those need to be distributed for free on a daily basis at every school in the state. And it's a travesty that we don't have the strategic stockpile of those masks right now. But I think they're out there, and we can purchase some, and I think we can ramp up production locally. I think we got to go back to some of the things that we had talked about early in the pandemic. We talked about social distancing. We talked about washing your hands for 20 seconds. Remember, everybody was singing happy birthday and washing their hands. We were cleaning and disinfecting surfaces. Remember, we were all wiping down packages coming in from the mail, just 2.5 years ago. Those things can't go away. And we should think about doing that as well, at least to get through the next 6 months of school, because everyone wants to be back in school. We need our kids back in school. Distance learning doesn't cut it. But you have to have teachers to teach a classroom. Because putting 100 kids in the cafeteria and having a secretary from the office or the janitor monitor the kids. That's not teaching. And so we need to make sure we have the workforce and the students in a safe environment. Part of that is assessing and addressing each school's ventilation and coming up with innovative solutions to improve air quality and ventilation in those classrooms. Again, going back to cleaning and disinfecting surfaces is really important. And then I really believe that there has to be, education, working together with our parents, having proper communication. But we need a statewide centralized plan. I think, Charlie and Mel, one of the things that we made a critical mistake is by acquiescing a state's authority to the counties. And I know the administration will probably disagree with that exact statement. But the fact that we have 4 different counties doing 4 different things right now just adds to the confusion. The governor has to implement a statewide, centralized, unified plan, give each county a little bit of latitude to tailor that to their counties, but there has to be a centralized statewide plan. And that doesn't exist today. It did at one point, and it doesn't exist today. So that's what I would suggest for schools. But I would also sit down with the HSTA president and listen to what we can come up with in terms of a strategy and a consensus. But with that, I know we have only a few minutes left, so I'd like to hear what Dr. Brilliant thinks or Larry thinks in terms of testing at schools, how we would navigate that, because that's a very touchy subject in schools, and then also any thoughts or any words of advice or that you would like to say to parents out there that are watching this that are still on the fence about vaccinating their children if they're eligible.
And Doc, also there's a comment, and this one I am posting because I want to make sure, because this is a topic. This whole thing right here. Why should our kids still wear masks? It is being shown globally more harm. I see that as being a common discussion on social media.
That's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate comment. The source of that is not a scientist. That's not based on good science. That's not accurate. I'm really sorry to say that. I say that those of us who are infectious disease doctors, and you should talk to anyone you know who is one, or epidemiologists, or people who have public health training, or just pediatricians. They will tell you that the usual cadence that we have every year for the flu is helpful in understanding what we will expect from COVID. And I say that because normally we expect kids to go away for summer vacation. They go to camps, they travel, whatever they do, and they share things with all the people that they meet. They share stories and they share viruses. And then they come back to the school opening in August or September on the mainland. And again, they share viruses. And then the kids get sick with colds or the beginning of flu season, and they go back to their families and they infect them. Generally speaking, it's the children that are the biggest carriers of respiratory diseases. And that's been the cadence every year. Last year, that wasn't true because there was no schools and all school was virtual. And so the idea took currency that the kids don't carry the disease and the disease isn't spread by the kids. That's just not true. So why wouldn't a child 1 to 5 can't get vaccinated, 0 to 5 who can't get vaccinated? Why wouldn't they be a carrier of COVID? They can't get vaccinated. They're susceptible. They will get the disease and they will spread it. We have a terrible conundrum with our schools. We desperately want our kids to go back to school. It's harmful for kids to be away from school. It's harmful for kids. And it's most harmful for the poorest and most vulnerable parts of society. Because their kids can't afford computers and screens, and their parents can't afford to get somebody to take care of them. They can't afford to give up going to work because their kids are home. We want our kids to go back to school, but we want our kids to go back to school safely. And we can get them to school safely. There's a testing cadence that can get schools to open and to stay open. The problem, again, is that will only keep the very narrow ecosystem of the kids and the teachers who are being tested to keep the disease outside of that world. We can exclude the virus. But you can't stop the fact that parents and teachers and superintendents and cafeteria staff and gardeners, that they're going to be exposed outside. And the absentee rate is so high. How can you keep a school going when 30, 40, 50% of all the staff are sick? My recommendation would be to ride out this peak. We're already seeing it, this peak of Omicron come down on the eastern seaboard, New York, New Jersey. It's coming to the Midwest. It's coming down. It will come down in California. I think it will probably peak in California, maybe the second or third week of February at the latest. And Hawaii will be a little bit after that. I think after that, we will have a lull. It'll be safer then to come back to school. And when you come back to school, we should be using tests to exclude the virus in much the same way as we do the islands of Hawaii. We know how to do that by testing every kid before they come back to school, testing the parents, testing the teachers, and asking those who are infectious to isolate themselves. And if we do that, we will be able to have safe schools. Bear in mind, it's not inexpensive if we're going to be doing PCR tests. I wrote with my colleague, Ian Lipkin, I wrote the protocols for Hollywood, for the Directors Guild, for the Producers Guild. And Hollywood has been able to keep all of its shows going, all of its productions going with no transmissions at all, zero on any set that followed the protocols. We've used these protocols elsewhere, and it works. But it's very expensive, and Hollywood can afford it. Our public schools can't afford it. So we need to find a less expensive way of getting to the same goal, but we should know it's possible. We shouldn't give up on it. We need to find a way to get to use inexpensive tests. And bear in mind, every family in the United States can just sign on right now to the government website, and within 3 or 4 days get 4 antigen tests. And the website, unlike with Medicare and Medicaid, it really works. You just sign on to it and get 4 antigen tests. That's a start. The teachers can, the kids, families can. We need to be able to incorporate that and these rapid molecular tests, and occasionally the PCR tests as well. And if there's a will to do that, there'll be a way to do it. We have the tools now that we didn't have before. A missing element of that, of course, is when can we get our kids 0 to 5 vaccinated? And Pfizer has been trying different doses. The kids who are over 12 are getting the same dose as adults are getting, and that's working out fine. But you can't give that much of a vaccine to a child who's 3 or 4 years old. So I think we're a little ways, maybe until the summer, before we have that problem solved. But we will get it solved. And as far as getting the 3rd dose, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's one of the most important tools that everybody on this Zoom call has in your toolbox, and it's free. And a 3rd dose will give you 95% protection against getting sick, getting hospitalized, or getting dead. And I can't recommend it strongly enough.
Well, man, I knew this hour would go by super quick, and it's just really not enough time. But I do want to give you all an opportunity to share some closing thoughts with our viewers. I'm not sure if you can see all the comments, but a lot of questions. We just don't have enough time. I apologize. You got to bring Dr. Brilliant back on later. But any closing thoughts, Dr. Brilliant? Any closing thoughts for our viewers that, and to our legislators that'll watch after the live show?
Well, I want to say Mayor Mitch in the Big Island is my friend. And if he's listening, Mitch Roth, please don't take any of the things that I've said and hate me and not let me back on the island.
Is that it?
No, there's more. I think that Kai is doing a wonderful job. Think about what he's doing, going up against the whole last 2 years and standing, holding a beacon of light, trying to illuminate our path forward. I just thank you so much, Kai, and I'm so grateful that you were that anonymous 808 number that called me. And thank you so much for inviting me on the show. And yeah, mahalo.
All right. Well, thanks, Doc. I actually do want to, and I'm going to bribe Kai to give me your number so we can get you back on. Kai, what's up, my man?
No, just mahalo, Larry, for being on this show. I took a chance and I called you, like you said, a while back, and I left a message, and about a week later, you returned my call, and we had a great conversation. And part of that call was out of frustration and exhaustion and just wanting to talk to somebody who I felt had the answers and someone that I could trust, a nationally and worldwide respected leader in dealing with a deadly pandemic. And so thank you so much for calling me back and for working together with me and for being on this show. I know it's a treat for Charlie and Mel and all of their viewers. Guys, someday we're going to look back and we can armchair quarterback, we can discuss, debate our response to the pandemic. But right now, Hawaii, we got to come together, and we need to take every step we can to care for one another, because this virus that has killed almost 900,000 people, and I'm convinced will kill 1 million people before the summer, does not care. We are at war with a deadly virus. We have to protect people. We have to protect our communities. We're dealing with an invisible opponent who exploits every weakness. And there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't one solution to this. It's going to take a layered response. It's going to and needs to include resources from the federal government. We have provided those resources to the states and the territories. But in order to rebuild trust and confidence and leadership in our communities, that has to start at the top. And we have to do that to defeat COVID-19 and any of the future mutations of the variants. In order to do that, it's going to take capacity, it's going to take trust, it's going to take leadership, that layered approach. But at the end of the day, we have to care for one another. We have to show respect. We have to educate. We have to use the tools that we have so that we can not only address COVID for the short term, but that we can build a resilient and layered response for the long term. And that's what I'm hoping to do as an elected leader in Hawaii, and one that feels a deep personal responsibility to getting the state back on track. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So mahalo for having me.
Mahalo. Hey, one real quick question, Doc. Do you know a Timothy Leary?
I have certainly in my day spent time with a Timothy Leary, yes.
Okay.
And
one of our
friends on Maui, for all of you who are friends of Ramdas and all of that satsang, I send you my love, and I love Maui for so many reasons, not least of which that Ramdas lived there. And if I could just use this moment, Kai, to ask a favor of you, when you go back to Washington, would you remind all of your and until everyone is vaccinated, everyone in the world. There's never been a time in my life when to do the most selfish thing and to do the most altruistic thing are exactly the same thing. It's in our selfish interests that everyone in the world get vaccinated. We can't leave the 3 million people who have not had a single dose without vaccine. We can't leave those who are in the final mile, where we can't get there with a refrigerated truck with an mRNA vaccine. We have to have another kind of vaccine. And I think I sent you the article we wrote in The Hill. We need to have a vaccine that can be put in the pouch of the health worker, the community health worker who's walking up the mountain, going on the boat, traveling on the dirt road to bring vaccine to the far remote corners of the world. Everybody's got to get vaccinated if we want to stop this. And I look for your help in Congress on that regard.
Will do.
Thank you, Doc. Charles.
Well, Thank you very much, everyone. You know, I echo something that Larry said, and that is, we got to give thanks to all those frontline workers. And I read some of the comments, and thank you again for all those wonderful comments. And then there's some that, I kept quiet because I was getting angry at some of the comments as well. But I will share this. I've got nearly 500 employees under my command on 8 different airports. I want you to realize one thing. We deal with people on a massive scale. We don't see the same people every day, and we don't know who's infected and who's not. We just have to err on the side of caution. And that's what scares me, because sometimes some of my employees have gotten tagged and they have to stay out, and it puts a big burden on the workforce at the airports. We're there to ensure your safety. We're not there to make pilikia. We're not there to make trouble with anybody. We just want to ensure your safety. Safety is reciprocated back as well. And that is, we need you to be as safe as possible, that you're not carrying this virus. And so I hope and pray that, you folks understand that when I've got people out there doing what the state wants us to do, they're dealing with a massive bulk at one time in any given day. And it would be very easy for them to throw in the towel and say, hey boss, I can't take this anymore. But they're dedicated, they have to support their family, and that's why they come to work. And the dynamics change every single day. And that's why, Mel, I made mention to you today. What happened is, again, we get thrown into a situation. What do? We have a COVID positive individual. Nobody wants to come and help us. What do? And that's where I think, Kai, the state, the federal government needs to stand up and let us know when we're confronted with this situation, what do we do? I know what I did in the past, and that is march the person right back to the ticket counter, buy a ticket, and send them back home where they came from. But is that the right thing to do? We need some guidance. We need some guidance. So I'm just saying this to all of the viewers tonight. Uncle Charlie is a little quiet because what Larry said really hit me. It hit me hard, and the reality set in, and that is, yes, we got to thank our frontline workers, because without them, if you get sick, there'll be nobody at the hospital to take care of you. And I also feel that way about my employees. If something happens, the airports are not safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, and Dr. Brilliant, we started this journey way back in March, as I said before we went live. I didn't tell you that Charlie lost his brother in the first wave of COVID deaths in New York. No one even knew what the hell COVID was. People was dying, and they were putting them in refrigerated containers. So Charlie's passion for this. Charlie's a lot more talkative, I think. But I think that your message tonight was one that we hear a lot of people, but everybody is different. And yours really I think impacted a lot of people. Now it did me, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us tonight. Kai, thank you for making the connection. I don't think we could have ever gotten Dr. Brilliant on what a great opportunity, and I just wish we had more time. To our viewers, you guys, the beneficiary of the information, and I like Charlie. Sometimes I see some of the comments, and the reason I read your bio is because we oftentimes, not anymore, but in the beginning, we get accused of bringing on hired guns, and I guess the bottom line is, who do you believe? We didn't have enough time to really discuss the efforts that you all had and the successes you had with smallpox and getting rid of smallpox. I wish we had more time, but Dr. Brilliant is one that's been there, done that. So who do you believe? Someone on YouTube that is trying to gain views and get, or someone that's been there and done that. So thank you so much. I did want to really quick plug Clubhouse, guys. Look up the comments data more. I don't know if you guys, Dr. Brilliant, I don't know if you're aware of Clubhouse, but it's a great tool. And we have a Hawaii COVID-19 Clubhouse that brings experts from all over the country, and you know what? A lot of good information. So go ahead and click that link. Tuesdays and Fridays at 5 o'clock is the clubhouse. Whew. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, folks. For our village, we'll be back on Friday. Friday night, we'll take a couple of days off, and look forward to a very, very fun evening. You guys stay safe. Kai, hug the family to Ohana. Same with you, Doc. We will see you guys soon.
Stay
Take
safe.
care. God bless. We love you guys.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Mahalo, Larry. Aloha.
Mahalo.